The invitation to surrender Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching the screens with an expression that confused everyone around her. 500 alien warships had just emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the solar system. Each vessel was the size of a city, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Any rational person should have been terrified. Sarah was smiling. "Admiral," Commander Jackson whispered beside her. "Their energy readings are off the charts. Those ships could glass Earth in minutes." Sarah nodded calmly. "I know, Robert. It's exactly what we hoped for." The alien fleet moved into formation, a perfect display of military precision. Within hours, they had surrounded Earth's orbital defense platforms. Then came the transmission that changed everything. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a creature that would haunt nightmares. Commander Thaxer of the Korthani Empire stood 12 feet tall, with obsidian skin that seemed to absorb light. His forearms ended in claws that could tear through steel, and his 3 eyes glowed like burning coals. When he spoke, his voice carried the authority of a species that had conquered 200 worlds. "Primitive humans," Thaxer began, his words translated by AI systems. "You will witness the fate of those who resist the Korthani Empire." The screen changed to show recordings of other worlds, cities burning, populations fleeing in terror, entire civilizations reduced to ash and bone. The footage was deliberate, calculated to inspire hopelessness. "The world of Nexara," Thaxer continued. "Population 12 billion. They resisted for 6 days." The screen showed a once beautiful planet, now turned to glass. The Veltari system, 18 worlds, 40 billion lives. They lasted 3 weeks. More destruction, more death, more proof of Korthani power. "Your choice is simple," the alien commander concluded. "Surrender now, and half your population will be spared to serve as workers. Resist and your species dies screaming." The transmission ended. The command center fell silent except for the hum of computers. Every officer waited for Admiral Chen's response. They expected panic, desperate battle plans, or at least some acknowledgement of the impossible odds they faced. Instead, Sarah walked to the communication console and activated a direct channel to the alien fleet. "Commander Thaxer," she said, pleasantly as if greeting an old friend. "This is Admiral Sarah Chen of Earth Defense Command. Thank you for that fascinating presentation." Even through the alien translation systems, Thaxer's confusion was obvious. "You thank me?" "Oh yes," Sarah continued. "It's always helpful to understand our guests' perspectives. Before we respond to your generous offer, would you mind if we showed you something? Professional courtesy between military commanders." Thaxer's 3 eyes narrowed. In 500 years of conquest, no species had ever responded to his ultimatum with curiosity. What could primitives possibly show the Korthani Empire? "What war really means," Sarah replied. Before Thaxer could respond, Dr. Elena Vasquez stepped beside Sarah. The xenobiologist had been preparing for this moment for decades. Her specialty wasn't studying alien biology, it was understanding alien psychology. "Commander," Elena said sweetly, "we've been monitoring your transmission since you entered our system. Your crew's biorhythms are fascinating. Elevated stress hormones, heightened aggression markers, but underneath—" She paused, studying readings on her tablet. "Underneath, there's something else." "Fear?" "No, not quite. Exhaustion, perhaps?" Thaxer took a step back from his own communications array. "How are you reading our biological data?" Elena smiled the way a teacher might smile at a confused student. "Oh, we've been studying the Korthani Empire for quite some time. Your previous campaigns were very educational. We learned so much about your species' neurochemistry, social structures, psychological weaknesses." The word weaknesses hung in the air like a blade. "You dare analyze us?" Thaxer roared, his claws extending. "We are the apex predators of this galaxy. We have conquered civilizations older than your sun." "Of course you have," Sarah agreed, gently. "And how has that been working out for you personally?" The question was so unexpected that Thaxter actually stopped shouting. What? 500 years of war, Sarah continued. Always moving, always fighting, always destroying. Tell us, Commander, when was the last time you saw a sunrise that wasn't through the smoke of burning cities? Something flickered across Thaxter's face, an expression his own species wouldn't have recognized. For just a moment, the mighty Conqueror looked tired. Dr. Vasquez was watching her instruments carefully. The psychological profile was building exactly as predicted. Commander, your neural patterns are very interesting. There's significant activity in the memory centers. Are you thinking about something specific? Thaxter shook his head violently. Enough games. You have 1 hour to surrender or we begin. Bombardment! The transmission cut out abruptly. In the command center, Sarah turned to her staff. Phase 1 complete. Elena, what's your assessment? Dr. Vasquez was analyzing data streams from sensors that the Corthani didn't even know existed. Perfect response. His aggression is masking deeper psychological fractures. 5 centuries of continuous warfare have left the entire command structure emotionally traumatized. They've forgotten how to exist without violence. Good. Sarah nodded. Robert, have Captain Torres begin Phase 2. Meanwhile, aboard the Corthani flagship, something strange was happening. Thaxter had returned to his command chamber expecting to feel the satisfaction of another inevitable victory. Instead, he found himself staring at a wall display showing star charts of conquered worlds. For the first time in decades, he wasn't seeing targets or resources. He was seeing homes, places where families had lived, children had played, artists had created beauty. Sir? His lieutenant, Sub-Commander Krixal, approached carefully. Are you well? Thaxter turned sharply. Of course I'm well, prepare for bombardment. But as his crew moved to implement the order, other strange things began happening throughout. The fleet. Navigation officers found themselves hesitating before targeting populated areas. Weapons specialists double-checked their systems obsessively. Communications personnel reported strange dreams from their last sleep cycle. Dreams of Earth. Not the Earth they were preparing to attack, but a different Earth. Green forests, blue oceans, cities filled with art and music and laughter. Dreams, so vivid they felt like memories. Dr. Vasquez was monitoring every second of it. Sarah, the neural infiltration is ahead of schedule. Their shared consciousness network is amplifying the psychological intervention. Sarah watched the readings with scientific fascination. How long until full penetration? At this rate, 6 hours. But Sarah, Elena hesitated. Some of these readings are concerning. We're not just changing their memories, we're rewriting their fundamental personality structures. Good, Sarah said firmly. They need to understand what they've become. Across the alien fleet, the changes were accelerating. Crew members found themselves questioning orders they'd followed without thought for centuries. Battle-hardened warriors discovered strange new emotions. Regret, empathy, hope. Thaxter felt it strongest. Of all, the human admiral's words kept echoing in his mind. When was the last time you saw a sunrise that wasn't through the smoke of burning cities? He tried to remember. Before the conquest of Veltar? Before Nexara? The memories blurred together, in an endless stream of violence and destruction. But underneath something else was emerging, a memory that felt both foreign and familiar, a memory of standing on a hillside watching twin suns rise over a peaceful valley, a memory of being young, before the wars, before the empire, before the endless hunger for conquest had consumed everything he'd once been. The memory wasn't his, but it felt more real than anything he'd experienced in 500 years. By hour 4, reports were flooding in from across the Corthani fleet. Weapons officers were having trouble maintaining targeting locks. Navigation crews were inputting wrong coordinates. Some ships were drifting out of formation entirely. But the strangest reports came from the lower decks, where ordinary soldiers were experiencing what could only be described as a collective awakening. They remembered their home worlds, not as conquered territories, but as places of beauty they'd helped destroy. They remembered other species, Not as enemies to be eliminated, but as people with families, dreams, and hopes just like their own. The psychological transformation was working exactly as humanity had planned. But Admiral Chen was already preparing for the most dangerous part of the operation. Soon, the Korthani would realize what was happening to them, and when they did, their response would determine whether this first contact ended in peace or in the complete annihilation of both species. As the 5th hour approached, Thaxir stood alone in his command chamber, staring at his reflection in the dark metal walls. The face looking back at him was the same as always, powerful, intimidating, built for war. But the eyes were different. They held something he hadn't seen in centuries. They held doubt. The horror of human innovation, Commander Thaxir was experiencing something his species had no word for, an identity crisis. As he prepared to give the order to begin Earth's bombardment, his hands trembled. The mighty Korthani warrior, conqueror of 200 worlds, was shaking like a frightened child. "Sir," Sub-Commander Crixall reported, "weapons systems are charged and ready. All ships report target acquisition on major population centers." Thaxir opened his mouth to give the order. That would end 13 billion human lives. Instead, what came out was, "Tell me about your family, Crixall." The sub-commander's 4 eyes blinked in confusion. "Sir? Your family. Before the wars. Do you remember them?" Crixall stood silent for a long moment. Then, to his own horror, he began to speak. Yes. My bondmate Velra. She made sculptures from crystal formations. Beautiful things. And my offspring, little Zektar. He used to collect stones from the riverbank and arrange them in patterns. Both warriors stared at each other in shock. Neither could remember the last time they'd spoken about anything but war, conquest, and death. Aboard Luna Station, Dr. Vasquez was monitoring the psychological breakthrough in real time. "Sarah, it's working better than we hoped. The entire command structure is experiencing memory integration. They're remembering who they were before the Empire militarized their species." Admiral Chen nodded grimly. "How deep does it go?" "Deep enough," Elena replied. "But Sarah, what we're doing, it's essentially performing involuntary psychological surgery on an entire alien species. The ethical implications are staggering. The ethical implications of letting them destroy billions more civilizations are worse," Sarah said firmly. "Continue the procedure." What the Korthani didn't understand was that humanity had been preparing for their arrival for over 30 years. Not with weapons or shields, but with the most advanced psychological and neurological manipulation technologies ever developed. The moment the alien fleet entered Earth's solar system, they'd been exposed to quantum-entangled particles that could cross dimensional barriers and interact directly with consciousness itself. Every Korthani in the fleet was now connected to a vast human-designed network that was systematically downloading their memories, analyzing their psychological structures, and carefully inserting new experiences designed to restore their suppressed empathy. Captain Marcus Torres was overseeing the operation from a hidden facility beneath the Sahara Desert. His team of neuroscientists, psychologists, and quantum engineers had spent decades developing what they called empathy bombs, weapons that didn't destroy bodies, but rebuilt souls. "Status report," Marcus called out to his team. "Neural pathway. Reconstruction at 60%, reported Dr. Kim Park, the lead neuroscientist. "We're successfully restoring suppressed emotional centers across the entire fleet. Collective memory integration proceeding ahead of schedule," added Dr. Ahmed Hassan, the quantum consciousness specialist. "They're beginning to remember not just their own suppressed memories, but the memories of species they've conquered." This was the true horror of humanity's response. The Korthani weren't just rediscovering their own capacity for peace. They were experiencing the terror and anguish of every civilization they'd destroyed. Every parent's scream as their children died. Every artist's despair as their life's work burned. Every lover's grief as they watched their beloved turn to ash. Thaxir suddenly doubled over, clutching his head as alien memories flooded his consciousness. He was a Nexarian mother, watching Korthani ships descend like metal locusts. He was a Veltari child running through burning streets. He was an elderly scholar from Zephyr Prime, seeing his civilization's greatest library consumed by flames. "Make it stop," he whispered, but the memories kept coming. 1,000 lifetimes of pain, all caused by his own hands. Across the fleet, similar scenes were playing out. Hardened warriors were collapsing as they experienced the weight of their centuries of violence. Some were weeping, an action that Korthani biology wasn't even designed for, yet they found ways. Others were staring in horror at their own claws, seeing them not as weapons but as instruments of unthinkable cruelty. Dr. Vasquez watched the psychological collapse with clinical fascination and deep sorrow. "Sarah, the integration is complete. They're fully experiencing the consequences of their actions. But the trauma levels are extreme. Some of them might not survive the psychological shock." Sarah felt a pang of guilt, but pushed it aside. "How many did they kill, Elena? How many species did they drive to extinction? This is justice." But even as she spoke, something unexpected was happening aboard the Korthani ships. The warriors weren't just breaking down, they were rebuilding themselves. The human-designed consciousness network wasn't just showing them their victims' pain. It was also revealing something the Korthani had forgotten existed within themselves, the capacity for redemption. Sub-Commander Crixall found himself kneeling on the floor of the command deck, but he wasn't just experiencing grief. He was feeling something else, something that made the guilt bearable. Hope. "Commander," he said to Thaxer, who was also on his knees. "I remember now. Before the wars, we weren't always like this." Thaxer looked up, his 3 eyes wet with tears he'd never thought possible. "I remember too. We were builders once, scientists, artists. We had philosophy, poetry, music." Around them, other crew members were nodding. The quantum network had restored not just suppressed emotions, but suppressed cultural memories. The Korthani were remembering their own golden age, before militarization had consumed their civilization. "What happened to us?" Crixall wondered, aloud. The answer came not from their own memories, but from the human network. Images and data flowed into their consciousness, telling the story of their own species' fall, how a desperate war against an ancient enemy had militarized their society, how emergency war powers had never been rescinded, how centuries of conflict had bred more conflict until war became their only purpose. They saw how their own government had systematically suppressed their people's capacity for peace, love, and creativity, how entire generations had been conditioned to know only violence, how they'd become prisoners of their own empire's need for endless expansion. Thaxer stood slowly, his legs still shaking. He looked around at his crew, truly looked at them for the first time in centuries. These weren't weapons or tools of conquest. They were people, damaged, traumatized people who'd been turned into instruments of horror against their own deepest nature. "Open a channel to Earth," he commanded. The transmission connected and Admiral Chen's face appeared on screen. She no longer looked like an enemy. She looked like someone who understood. "Admiral Chen," Thaxer began, his voice completely different from the roar of conquest that had opened their first communication. "What have you done to us?" Sarah's expression was gentle but firm. "We gave you back what your empire took away. Your ability to feel compassion. Your capacity to see other beings as people rather than obstacles. Your connection to your own species' better nature." "The pain," Thaxer whispered. "The memories of everyone we killed had to be faced," Sarah completed. "You can't move forward until you acknowledge what you've done. But Commander, and this is important, what you feel isn't just guilt. Can you identify the other emotion?" Thaxer was quiet for a long moment, examining his own mental state. Then his eyes widened. "Forgiveness. I can feel forgiveness, not just giving it, but receiving it." Dr. Vasquez leaned into frame. "The consciousness network doesn't just share trauma, Commander. It shares healing. Every act of forgiveness, every moment of compassion, every choice to rebuild rather than destroy, those are part of the collective memory too." Around the command deck, the crew was experiencing the same revelation. Yes, they had caused immeasurable suffering. But the human network was also showing them every act of courage by their victims, every choice to help rather than hurt, every example of species recovering from devastation to build something better. Why? Thaxer asked. Why show us mercy? We came here to destroy you. Sarah's smile was sad but warm. Because someone has to break the cycle. Your species was traumatized into becoming traumatizers. If we just destroyed you, we'd be continuing the same pattern of violence. Instead, we chose to heal you. Captain Torres's voice came over the communication from his desert facility. Commander, your fleet has been broadcasting a distress signal for the past hour. It's not a military distress call, it's a psychological one. Your people are asking for help. Thaxer looked around his ship. Everywhere, Cortani were sitting together, talking quietly, comforting each other as they processed centuries of suppressed trauma. Some were sharing memories of their homeworld's beauty. Others were discussing what they might rebuild instead of what they might conquer next. We are asking for help, Thaxer confirmed. We don't know how to be anything but weapons. Can you teach us? We can try, Sarah replied. But first you need to contact your empire. Tell them what happened here. Give other species a chance to choose healing over warfare. Thaxer nodded slowly. The High Arbiter Velnash will not understand. The Empire's entire structure depends on endless war. Then maybe it's time for a new structure, Dr. Vasquez suggested. You're not the same people who left Corthani space. You don't have to follow the same orders. As if summoned by their conversation, the ship's communication system activated. The screen filled with the image of High Arbiter Velnash, an ancient Corthani whose body was more machine than flesh after millennia of warfare. Thaxer, the Arbiter roared. Why have you not reported Earth's destruction? Why are your ships holding position instead of moving to the next target system? Thaxer stood straighter than he had in centuries. When he spoke, his voice carried new authority, not the authority of a conqueror, but of someone who had found his true purpose. High Arbiter, he said calmly, I regret to inform you that the conquest of Earth has been cancelled. In fact, all future conquests have been cancelled. The fleet is returning to Corthani space to begin reparations for our previous actions. Velnash's mechanical eye focused to a sharp point. Have you lost your mind, Commander? No, Thaxer replied with something that might have been a smile. I think I've found it again. The transformation was complete. 500 ships that had arrived as instruments of destruction were now becoming something unprecedented in galactic history. A fleet dedicated to rebuilding what they had once torn down. But as Admiral Chen watched the Corthani fleet prepare to return home, she knew this was only the beginning. Word of humanity's weapon would spread throughout the galaxy. Some species would be terrified of Earth's ability to rewrite consciousness itself. Others would beg for the same healing that had transformed their oppressors. Humanity had won their first interstellar conflict not through superior firepower, but through superior compassion. They had weaponized empathy, turned healing into a form of warfare, and proved that sometimes the most powerful victory was helping your enemies become better than they ever thought possible. The Corthani Empire's reign of terror was over, but their age of redemption was just beginning. As the alien fleet departed Earth's solar system, Thaxer sent one final message. Thank you for showing us that war is not the only way to be strong. We will spend the rest of our lives proving worthy of the mercy you have shown us. Admiral Chen smiled as she watched the ships disappear into hyperspace. You already have, Commander. You already have.